Welcome to the Tech Panel.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The podcast where tech minds meet.
Welcome to the Tech Panel, where we dive into the world of startups, innovation, and disruptive technologies. I'm your host, James Arvin, and today we're joined with...
I'm Jamie Alotta.
And today we're excited to have a guest with extensive experience in the healthcare IT industry. If you're interested in how technology and innovation are transforming healthcare industry and management, you're in the right place. We're thrilled to have you today, Mike. A little bit of background for you. I hope you don't mind. Mike is the Chief Executive Officer of VitalHub UK. Since August 2020, Mike has been overseeing the strategic direction and day-to-day operations of VitalHub's business across the EMEA region, focusing on delivering innovative healthcare solutions that enhance patient care and operational efficiency. Under his leadership, VitalHub UK has been pivotal in deploying technology solutions that address complex challenges in healthcare delivery. Welcome to the show, Mike. How you doing?
Thanks for having me. Really looking forward to this.
We're glad to have you on board. Mike, I see you transitioned from a military career into healthcare. What critical moments or influences sparked that significant shift in your career?
An injury, quite a bad one.
Injury?
Which meant that and that wasn't because of healthcare. Healthcare had no part in me that direction of travel. It was. I got injured in an accident, which meant that I was laid up for a year or two. I turned my wife inside out with things I was trying to do, such as, painting, baking, things I can't do, shouldn't do, should never do. I eventually went out and bought myself a PC. This is the late 90s now, by the way. So if you wonder why people still needed to buy PCs, we didn't always have them then. And I started an IT computer science degree, which early 2000s when I left the British Army, I got into this industry off the back of that.
That's such an interesting background for me. The first thing where my mind goes here is, obviously, you've been in your industry now for a number of decades. And in healthcare in particular, you had to have seen some really interesting moments, probably positive or negative. Could you share some pivotal changes you observed over the years? Like how these changes shaped your perspective on the industry?
Great question. I think the biggest the first thing to say is a huge amount hasn't changed, which is somewhat disappointing. But what has changed is the willingness for patients and staff, for that matter, to accept tech. When I got into this industry just after the millennium, nobody had any real experience in dealing with technology or innovation, and it was far too much change at that period of time. So we went through something you're probably aware of, or you may not be aware of, apologies if you know, but we went through something here called the National Programme for Change around the turn of the new millennium. And essentially what we were trying to achieve in healthcare was that you had a single care record. If you were a patient that came from Glasgow and you were on holiday in Cornwall and you became ill, everybody that was dealing with your healthcare record at that time in your care could access your medical history, your healthcare record, etc. Sadly, it was far too much change at that period of time, and trying to pull together all of the relevant systems, companies, suppliers, etc., just was too big of a leap. What I'd like to say now, 22, 23 years later, is that the whole healthcare industry has embraced technology and change, but it hasn't. But it's far better. And it's clearly far better because of the world we live in. We live in a far more technically advanced era now. People have had to embrace smartphone technology, had to embrace web-based technology. So what we're seeing now, really, I'd say more than around the last 5 years, maybe 10 at a push, is patients are now expecting to be treated in different ways. They're expecting to have access to their healthcare record. Because of COVID, pushing forward the virtual support side, they're expecting to speak to a doctor online or via a telephone. They're expecting to have access to their records in their hand. And because of that, the industry itself has become more open to supporting these technical advances, more open to becoming more tech savvy. So things are far, far easier than they were 23 years ago, but nowhere near as far as you would expect compared to other industries, which have completely embraced technology. I'd say we're probably 10 years behind, other industries in the public sector, and certainly industries in the private sector around the world.
My mind is going straight to this image. I could really got to pull this up so we can like have it on like a graph or something. But they did some research into the U.S. and I'm sure it draws many similarities to other countries, but it showed all the various industries and where they place in technological adoption. And I was in construction before, and we were like second to last. But I remember your industry was only like 2 rungs up the ladder from us on a like list of 30 industries. So
Yeah,
that doesn't surprise me too much. What do you think is a big driver here? What do you think is holding the industry back from your perspective?
money. If you look at the UK, I know the UK obviously intimately, but I'm also very familiar with Australia, Canada, the Middle East, parts of Europe. Very similar. I mean, the US is a unique, so might come back to that.
Yeah.
But it's budgets and change, but budgets and change. The technology is as good as it can be based on the budgets available, and those that the more advanced technology and interlinked technology that will be required to run a real healthcare ecosystem not only takes time, but it takes a lot of money. And that's, although it's difficult to quantify how important technology is within healthcare, what is not difficult to quantify is patient care. So the vast amount of money that comes within the healthcare industry clearly goes on to patient care first. So it's purely budgets, and also because of that, you don't always get what you might get in Silicon Valley or elsewhere. You don't always get the Elon Musks or that sort of entrepreneurs coming into that marketplace because of those budgets and that revenue, and also because of the compliance legislation and because of the challenges in growth and adaptability. So there's not an easy answer to answer that, unfortunately, but that's it in a nutshell.
This is such an interesting perspective. Where am I coming from with this? I suppose from the layman's perspective here, when I think of healthcare, I can't imagine a world where there's bottlenecks driven by monetary problems.
Yeah.
Right? When I go to the doctor, I can't imagine, like, all I'm thinking to myself is, this just cost me an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the conversation I hear from most people on the news. They're saying, I can't afford to go to the doctor. How do you think it's made its way to a situation where the cost is prohibitive to the point where people are coming into your industry wanting to seek services but can't because they're being priced out? And then on the other side of the fence, you're in the industry, you're working on these problems, and you're being hindered by monetary restrictions. What's going on here? What do you think's causing these two problems to meet each other?
I think again, there's almost a double barrel answer to this, because there's two healthcare economies we need to really touch on. You've got the US healthcare economy, which is completely driven by money.
Yeah.
You will only get the best service if you can afford to have the best service or you have the best insurance. Mm-hmm. Take that to one side for a moment, because that's an hour in its own right, I believe, if not more. And you guys will know better than me, really, on the ground, how that affects people's lives.
Sure.
But if you come to the public healthcare ecosystems, like the NHS, like the British NHS, again, I'll come back to if you have a certain amount of money, yet you still have a £7.8 million outpatient elective backlog, then trying to decide how you attack that backlog today rather than tomorrow is the difficulty. Because you've got 7.8 million people who are desperate for care. They're really sick people. Some of them, I mean, critically sick.
Yeah.
And can't be treated in a timely manner simply because there's so many of them and not enough resources. But you know that unless you think 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the track and start to implement products, solutions, you're never going to really attack this backlog. You're just going to be dealing with day-to-day changes. Then you're not going to get anywhere. We'll be here in 20, 30 years. But again, there's not this amount of money available that we can throw resources at it to clear this backlog. So what you've got to do is you've got to come up with innovative ways of streamlining patients through different routes than we've done before. We've got to find ways of identifying patients that shouldn't be on these lists, that patients can be treated in different ways, that patients that can be treated from home, patients that could be treated in private sectors, patients that can treat themselves, so that you take large chunks of this backlog out so you can then address the process rather than the bottleneck. And it's, as long as I've been alive, and I'm in my 50s, this has been a challenge for the UK and the world.
Yeah.
But it's only gotten worse, and it's only gotten worse because COVID. The UK, COVID and Brexit have been two huge influences on the outcome of healthcare delivery. But I'd say that probably affects every country in the world as well in a different way.
Do you foresee there being some kind of happy medium in that exact space? Like, as you said, for as long as you've known or can remember, there's been that issue. Is there something that where we're looking at a happy medium where it's going to actually get better? Can you foresee something like that? I guess maybe particularly in the UK, where you're currently located.
Yeah, and I think this will come across as a semi-sales pitch here, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about my companies. I'll talk about the industry, but then I'll also hark back to the challenges of change. But it's very difficult, and I understand why a nurse or a doctor looking at tech could see how this will have a material impact on healthcare, because, as I said before, all they're really focused on is patient-centric care, and rightly so.
Yeah.
But as someone that spent 23 years, and more recently the last 4 years with 13 companies now, form VitalHub UK, we can see the end game. But we can see in the distance, we can see if technology is adopted in the way that we all hope. And when I say we, I'm talking about the industry, hope that by the time the patient arrives at that nurse or that doctor, everything will be available, all the data will be available to treat that patient more effectively. And also, and more importantly, those patients that no longer need to be in front of a nurse or doctor will be treated in a different way. So everybody, including the patients, which are the most important part of this, where everybody will have a far happier experience and better outcomes. Jamie, I could spend an hour or more giving you nuances as to why that would work, and I'll happily do that in the future should you want me to. But it's a big answer to a larger question, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So on one hand, what I'm hearing is the industry is being hindered by its inability to access untapped resources due to a backlog of all of these, forgive me, I forget the term that you used there, but all of these patient cares that are on a backlog, essentially.
Yeah.
And you're saying they can't get to them because time constraints, resource constraints, whatever it may be. Are you implying that if we could tap into that, it would solve the bottleneck from a financial perspective?
So let me give you a couple of examples.
Sure.
And again, I don't want to come across here because we're having a general conversation, but I don't want to come across as pitching to you. But I could use two examples that are close to my heart, which is, so we have a product called Shrew, And Shrewd essentially is a business intelligence solution that identifies urgent and elective care bottlenecks. Okay,
Okay.
from a localized to a regional to a national point of view. So what you currently have in the world is you will have, let me give you two regions. You could have, let's say, Merseyside and Cheshire, where I live,
Hmm.
and Greater Manchester. Very close, only 40 miles apart, give or take some miles. But you might have in Greater Manchester lots of ability to treat patients on that day. But you then may have 20, 30 miles away in Liverpool or Cheshire, Merseyside or Cheshire, patients in a huge backlog that aren't going to get seen for 8 to 10 hours. They may be sat on in gurneys, they may be sat in ambulances, they may be
Yeah.
bottlenecking EDs. At the moment, there's no visibility of that. Never mind being able to do something about it, but there's no visibility of it. By using the likes of Shrewd, you're able to see in one region that there is capacity to take on patients,
Hmm.
and in another region that over encumbered by too many patients. So hypothetically, you should be able to move patients 30 miles down the road and treat them more effectively. That is where we're heading with that. Or you might look and say, again, another one of our products, InTouch Flow, which is based around outpatient flow management. So a typical visit for a patient might take 3 to 5 hours. If you've broken your leg, you need to have a follow-up appointment to see a clinician. You need to have an X-ray, a blood test. You need to be weighed and measured. You need to go here. You need to go there. The system within the hospital is conjoined, but not in a way that allows them to be streamlined at the moment. So let's say you can see in one clinic, you can see 5 patients an hour. By deploying products that have a wide view of the services within that hospital, electronically wide, you're able to then streamline different patients into different specialties and to have different services and tests and activities, so that by the time they get to see their clinician, all of that's been done. And rather than seeing 5 patients that hour, you see 8 patients that hour.
Yeah.
So coming back to the general question of the £7.8 million elective, 7.8 million patient elective backlog.
That's what I was looking for.
Firstly, if you were able to look at your capacity as a country rather than as a localized region and move patients around, you'll be able to treat those patients far more quickly and more effectively. Secondly, once they're in the hospital, if you're able to streamline their journey, from 5 patients an hour to 8 patients an hour, hypothetically, you will attack that backlog more effectively, get through those patient lists more effectively, get those patients off the backlog and off the waiting list, and the healthcare system will take a breath. Additionally, the other probably most important challenge we have within healthcare at the moment, certainly in the UK, but worldwide, is the bottleneck in the ER, in the ED. Because that is what is effectively holding up healthcare. Because if you have a ED that is rammed and blocked and not moving, the reason it's not moving is because on the outside of the hospital, you've got ambulances backed up, queuing, waiting to drop their patients off. So they can't not only drop their patients off, but they can't then go and treat and pick up other emergency patients. Then inside the hospital, you've got full beds. So you've got no way of moving the patients out of ED into those beds. So you've created an absolute bottleneck, logjam within your hospital. So what do we need to do? What we need to do is obvious to us in the industry. I'll explain it, but not an easy thing to do. We need to find ways of getting patients out of that hospital, out of those hospitals' beds effectively. How do we do that? We need to have the services in place to deploy them back into the community safely, with care, with love, with affection, but get them into the community, thus releasing those beds. By releasing those beds, we then move patients out of ED into those beds. By removing those patients out of ED, we then take those patients out of the ambulances and move them back into ED. By doing that, we release those ambulances back into the community where we offer a safe and caring environment for patients. How do we do that? I could go on for hours, but by technology, pulling together those services, having access to data from a regional and national basis, by deploying real-time data to allow you to effectively make those changes on immediately and move those patients around in real time. How will we get there? It's going to take time and it's going to take change, but the products are there, they're coming. It's just going to take time.
And I guess so. I know you said earlier that you didn't sort of want to pitch, but you are the CEO of VitalHub. How is that integrating? Like, I'd like to learn more about how that is integrating with the issues that you're currently having or that you're seeing over there in the UK. And then you mentioned, like I think the Middle East as well, and Australia, and obviously the North America. So how is VitalHub going to come into that space, it is in that space, but over those different regions? And how is that going to transition and take place in each one of those regions? Because each one of those places obviously have different issues with how they're governed and how the medical industry of that region works.
I mean, I could talk firstly about the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a vision of VitalHub. So VitalHub's been around since 2017, started in Toronto, Canada, led by our president and group CEO, Dan Matlow. And his vision was essentially to build an ecosystem of solutions. Healthcare is based on disparate solutions, based on disparate infrastructure. And to improve healthcare, it has to be conjoined. It has to be seamless and conjoined. So what we are trying to do is essentially build an end-to-end patient-centric healthcare solution based on acquisitions and partnerships. So the vision that we have essentially is that if a patient becomes sick at home, we then take over that patient's care via the first interaction with the GP. And then we transition that patient either through the GP, through community services, through into the hospital bed, out of the hospital and back into the community. And we offer the solution to effectively manage and track that patient right through all of that. Coming back to what I said about the national program for IT, patients believe that's probably there already. It's not.
Yeah.
So the only way that we can improve healthcare is by monitoring all of this and driving all of this. Additionally, we all probably believe that all of these systems currently work together. They don't.
They
As
don't.
I said,
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So at VitalHub and VitalHub UK, our vision is to put bridges in between these solutions. So that as far as the patient and the clinician and the clinical team are concerned, it's seamless. In the background, it's a bit like a crazy, process going on.
Yep.
That's our issue. But our view is to make it as peaceful and seamless for the patients and the clinicians using those solutions.
So in an ideal world, patient, you're saying you want them to go into community first, into the hospital, after they're sorted in the hospital, back into the community. Would a different way of describing this be, we want you to go to your local GP. If the GP finds that you need hospital care, they'll push you into a hospital. That's where you receive that care. Once your emergency services or whatever it has been that they've offered you has been sorted, then you're pushed back onto your GP for remedial care throughout the journey of your services.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I paint the picture a little bit clearer for it, especially for the listeners, you're of the mind that if you go to a GP, they don't recommend based on relationships or who they know as carers that can solve for these particular issues. Instead, what they're doing is they're simply saying, you need to have surgery on your nose so you can breathe better. I put you into a national register and it looks for the availability, not based on who you know, who you want to go to, but who's available and who has the best capacity to service you. And that's how you triage or define where care is provided to those people, versus just sending them to a particular hospital. And then the hospital determines whether or not they have the resources. You want it to be put back into a GP's care where they can assign it based on availability through this system that you're proposing. Is that correct?
Sorry, the reason I paused there is because there's no one real answer to that. Because the workflow that I gave is one workflow of many.
Sure.
You know, some GPs can treat their patients, and the patients never have to go to a hospital.
Yeah. That's right.
Sometimes a patient's first interaction with healthcare is the ED department. Sometimes the patient's first interaction with healthcare is a community nurse. Yeah. What we're trying to do, to answer your question, is bridge those gaps. You see, if I was to go and ask my mother, who's in her 70s, how she thinks healthcare works, she would say that she goes to the doctor sends her to the hospital if she needs to, the hospital fixes her and sends her home.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that healthcare is up, down, left, right, and backwards. So what I mean by that is the GP may send you to hospital, but then the hospital may send you back out to community, and then the community might send you back into hospital, and then the hospital might send you to a tertiary care system, or the hospital might decide you require therapy, or the hospital might decide that you might need to go back into the care of a nurse. So there's no direct line of travel. The problem with that is the systems in place can't handle that. There's no way of managing it because there's no straight lines. If it was straight line care, it would be very simple, but it's not. So what we're trying to do is offer the flexibility and ability to move left, right, up, down, back, or forth, but still maintain that patient's record, still maintain the control of that patient's care, and streamline that patient's care so it's the best that we can offer within our industry. I know that's not an easy question to answer, and maybe the answer probably doesn't give you everything you need, but this is what we're trying to achieve based on what we're trying to do.
Do you foresee a golden state where if the solution is as successful as you hope it would be, or is, then there's this national register that stores all of your medical information? And in that situation, what becomes the true value of having a dedicated GP, right? I feel like what we do when we go to a GP is they assess us, they build a file on us, they learn about our history. And that's what you're paying for every single time you go to a GP, which kind of sucks more and more of your resources down and eventually drives you in the direction of never going to the doctor. Do you think this system would eventually make it so you could just go to any GP? You could go into this system and say, I need help. And then it doesn't matter. You don't need to build a relation to a GP. We'll just show you all the ones that are available and they all have access to these resources. And then that's the kind of seamless flow that you're looking to sort of solve for here?
Yes and no. I think, again, we talk about two different types of healthcare economies. You talk about the US or Middle East, let's say, and the public type of healthcare systems. I guess if you are paying for your care out of your insurance or your pocket, you will have an aspiration to see a particular doctor. Certainly if it's, let's say, maternity care or that sort of personalized care. In the UK and other economies, it's different. You're treated freely at the point of care. So some people already do not expect to see the same GP. I don't think I've seen the same GP twice in 10 years.
Really?
Wow, that's very different from over here.
Yeah, very different from here.
Yeah, you're almost always with the same person over and over again. Yeah.
And that's gotten worse since COVID because we don't really have access to GPs in the same way. It's very difficult given our challenges over here with backlogs to get access to a GP.
Sure.
But my aspiration is not seeing an individual. My aspiration is just seeing a doctor. So coming back to your question, yes, I think from our healthcare economy, that would work better than perhaps the US healthcare economy. We're focusing on the UK for a second. There will be this could be controversial, I'm about to say here, but I'll say it
I
anyway.
Go
love it.
for it.
Now
Love
I'm
it.
interested.
There will be a time, whether it's in my working lifetime, I don't know, but I can see it coming, where GPs to a point will become redundant. I honestly believe that AI at some point will take over general practice, because I can imagine all the GPs screaming at me now down the screen. I'm not saying that AI will replace doctors. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that some care will become transactional. And if my GP care at the moment is I pop a message into a portal, which I do, saying I don't feel well, and the portal is already using a bot to ask various specific generic questions, such as why aren't you feeling unwell? Why are you feeling unwell? Then straight away, there's the first stage. The second stage to that is if I put a commonly asked healthcare symptom, then that bot might be able to say, well, what you need is a prescription of X. Come back in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
To the next stage, I would get a phone call from my GP. So again, they're not looking at me. They're not looking at my, they're not weighing me, measuring me, taking my blood pressure, nothing at all. They're talking to me on the end of the phone. So AI will be able to replace that. AI, based on the answers I give and based on my medical history and record that artificial intelligence will have access to, they will be able to give as accurate as a GP based at that point of an answer to be able for me to be treated. If it sits outside of their area of expertise, the same for the GP, a living GP, then I will be referred into a specialist stream. So I see 10 to 20 years, AI will take over a large proportion, I think, of healthcare IT and certainly interaction with patients. Now, the issues with that, of course, are obvious. Will we trust it? That's the first part. Younger people, as they come through, clearly will have more trust of technology than the older generations, including me now at that point, sadly. But as time goes on, it'll become as norm. I know where you guys are from, but San Diego, I think it's San Diego, you quite regularly now get into, artificial intelligence driven cars. Ask us to do that 10 years ago, we would never have done it. So I see this happening with healthcare. And by doing that, that will have a material impact, I think, on backlogs and care of patients, because you'll be able to have access to a AI doctor, if you like, immediately 24/7.
So being the CEO of VitalHub, and you foreseeing that this is possibly the direction that the industry will go with AI and whatnot, what do you have in place for your staff and your programming? What strategies do you have in place to take you to that level when the time comes with VitalHub?
I mean, we within our kind of blue sky, our R&D kind of setup, we're looking at personalized medicine, predictive analytics, because we have access to millions of lines of data, tens of millions, hundreds of millions actually, lines of data. So we're looking at predictive analytics, what trends, how can we, using that data and reviewing that data and using our own AI tools, predict how patients are going to be requiring care and care pathways. Similarly, AI powered diagnostics, similar to what I talked about earlier. How can we, using that information and using AI, offer quick diagnostics to help the clinical teams make their own diagnostics? You probably have sat like I have in front of your own doctor and they've used Google. If they haven't, that.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen my doctor do that.
My best friends are doctors and they use GPT for your issues. So
so they're going to AI already at
happening.
that point. Yeah.
Yeah. And the beauty of that is, of course, they're experts and very intelligent and educated in the healthcare medicine, but they're using that tool. And they're able to make a judgment based on what they're seeing in that tool, whether to be viable or not. AI will
Hmm.
be able to do the same thing when we get to that point. So diagnostics and treatment plans will be powered. So we're investigating that, and also we're looking at as part of our mergers and acquisition strategy, looking at companies that supply and develop these sort of tools. Um, Coming back to what I said earlier about getting patients back out into the community, telemedicine and remote monitoring products, again, that look at diagnostics and trends based on the data. So the patients in their home, patients in care facilities can be managed and treated in those care facilities without having to take them back into a hospital. Um, AI can offer huge opportunities in operational efficiency because it can quickly assess the data in real time in a hospital. And you'll be
Yeah.
able to see where you've got capacity in one part of a hospital or you're overburdened in another and adjust capacity accordingly. And AI drug discovery, drug development and optimized clinical trials and data. So we're looking, how do we feed into that? How do we feed into that with our products? And how do we use data-driven solutions to provide better healthcare using AI? Is the short answer. If that is a short answer, I apologize.
I don't think there is such thing as a short answer in the
No.
medical field in particular. So,
So some of the more interesting things I'm interested to hear from, within the healthcare industry, you've obviously been under some interesting pressures from various crises that have occurred over the past couple of years. I think you even moved into the VitalHub role during the start of COVID. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I was the chief exec and one of the shareholders of a company called In Touch with Health.
Mhm.
I was involved in that company since 2009, and In Touch with Health was essentially outpatient flow management. Um, but during COVID, we were approached by VitalHub, and we were acquired. Typically, when you're acquired, of course, as a chief exec, you are maintained for a period of time to help the transition.
Sure.
But clearly, Dan and I got on, and was doing a decent job for Dan. So he asked me to stay on as chief exec for VitalHub in its entirety, VitalHub UK in its entirety. So we've grown alongside myself, grown within VitalHub to go from 2 or 3 companies that we had at that time to, depending on the metrics used, 13 companies currently within the VitalHub UK portfolio, and maybe a dozen or so more in the VitalHub corporation portfolio. So there's been a massive change. Also, I think we've all had to evolve, and tech's interesting in that
yeah.
evolution. Um, Before COVID, myself and 30–40% of my team would spend all of our time in cars or trains. We would have face-to-face meetings with clinical staff, operational staff within hospitals, and that's the way that the culture worked back then.
Yeah.
Now it's like this. I'd say 90% of all interactions are like this now. There's less travel. There's more tech reliance on meetings and communications. But what that's enabled me to do, coming back to the original question, is it's enabled me to transition from the old In Touch chief exec role to VitalHub UK chief exec role and running all of these companies and dealing with our over 1,000 implementations that we currently have out there. Again, I'm
And
not sure that completely answers your question there. Apologies.
well, how exactly do you think that crisis has shaped or defined VitalHub as a business now? Has that taken you in a direction you hadn't foreseen previously? Has it shaped the business as it stands today?
It's a great question. It's not one I've thought too hard about. I mean, clearly it has. Clearly, healthcare has changed. But more importantly for that question, the suppliers around the healthcare IT world have changed, and the culture's changed.
Mhm.
Like I say, back in the day, you would spend 5 hours in a car for a 1 hour meeting.
Yep.
That's not efficient.
Yeah,
It's
that's
also
right.
not. It's not good for a small business, really, if you think about costs.
Mhm.
Now, because of COVID, that's accelerated the virtual world.
Hmm.
Not only has it accelerated the virtual world, but there's a large proportion of healthcare staff that work from home for periods of times as well. So um, we work now in a virtual environment in a way that is effective for all of the industry. Um, that makes us far more efficient in the form of I can now have 6 or 7 meetings a day as opposed to one.
Yeah.
As can the operational leaders of the hospitals and the what's called the integrated care boards over here. They can have multiple meetings with multiple suppliers and multiple staff on one given day, and it also enables you to work around that. There is a negative, however. There's two negatives really. The first one is the beauty of the travel in the past was the ability to decompress after a meeting, or the ability to prepare mentally
Yeah.
for a meeting. That's gone. You go from one meeting to the next.
Yeah, you bounce
Uh,
out of one and straight into another. Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, and because we had a slower pace of life back then, because we had no other way of doing it, you would spend more time, or you'd have more time available to actually prepare physically, and also prepare your notes and your paperwork and your follow-ups off the back of any meeting you've had.
Hmm.
Now that pace has increased. So with my 6 or 7 meetings, wherever I have a day, I might even have more. I'm not. My diary's back to back typically, sadly. But I'm having to find more time in my personal time, if you like, to catch
Yeah.
up on my admin work that comes off the back of these meetings.
Yeah.
However, this is quite amusing as well. But I'm now using AI tools to help with that. So I'm using AI-based transcribing tools to effectively create my own minutes, meeting
Yeah.
minutes.
I do the same thing.
Yeah, it's a big one for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's getting better again,
Hmm.
and it's a learning curve really. But to back to the question, it is a very different world. Some of it mostly better, I would suggest.
Yeah.
And we were able to do because of this. You think 13 businesses in one form or another. That's hypothetical. That's 13 offices as well. I was able to close down 8/10 of those office spaces because they weren't being used, and only have 2 or 3 offices across the UK. So there's a cost implication there. There's an efficiency implication there. But again, there's always a negative to a positive. I then have to find ways of fostering the culture and keeping my 200 plus team together.
Yeah.
So we have to
Yeah.
definitely have at least.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's a massive thing is your culture and whatnot. Once you've got people working remotely, opposed to the culture that they had all the time in the office that was literally just whipped out from underneath us.
Yeah.
So there's obviously like big learning curves for management, CEOs alike, and the staff that are there.
Yeah.
But we're sort of coming to the end. Of the podcast. I'm gonna throw it to you.
Yeah, no worries. Well, look, a question we like to always end these conversations with, one, as we wrap up, could you talk to us about a piece of technology, particularly software, that comes to mind that sort of changed the way that you operate, or something that you would always tell someone about, like you're a big evangelist of this particular system? What is it and why?
It's definitely Shrewd, as I mentioned earlier. So Shrewd now is it's
Can you
almost a national
spell
solution.
that for us, just for the list? It's
SHREWD.
Yeah.
SHREWD.
Yeah.
Shrewd.
Nailed it.
Oh, look at you go.
1 second, I want to make sure I get this right, because I always say it wrong. But it's Single Health Reliance Early Warning Dashboard.
Okay. Yep. Right. Got
Um,
you.
essentially, the ability that True can offer to the system, if we use the word system, is never ending.
Hmm.
Because the problem you've got with anything, it's like anything in life, if you don't have the access to the data, then you've got no way of knowing exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
So what True does, it gives you real-time visibility of that data that can enable you as a system, to adapt. That has to be, in most parts, the starting point. Because without that data and without seeing what's going on from a regional, a local, a national point of view, you've no idea what you need to do where and when. And it might seem like a simple concept, but it's a complex concept of actually getting this data together, because the data comes in multiple formats. It comes from multiple providers. It comes in multiple arrays of type. So to gather that together is hard. Then to portray that in a way that is useful and effective for the healthcare industry is equally as hard. And then not only that, to then get acceptance of that.
Yeah.
So it goes into command centers. So you're able to make adjustments on, you may have an ED that has 7 ambulances parked up outside. How do you know about that? True will show you that. You then might have another ED 15 miles away that has no ambulances stacked up. So you move ambulances. You might have one hospital that has absolutely no beds. You've got patients laying on gurneys in corridors. The next hospital along, or the next hospital 2 along, might have empty beds. So you move patients across. You may have an outpatient department that has the ability to take on another 30 appointments a week in one region, but in another region, they can't take any additional capacity on for the next 3 months. So you move patients across. True offers you that visibility immediately and enables you to react. The bit we need to work on, and we are working on, is how we get the adoption across the industry to make best effect and use of that.
Mike, I want to thank you for definitely coming on today. It's been enlightening, to say the very least. I've learned quite a few things here. And there's many other things, many other questions I think have been left unanswered that I'd really love to ask.
Absolutely.
Mike, would you like to leave us with any remaining thoughts, or take an opportunity to plug the company that you work with really quickly, or how can people find you?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. So VitalHub UK, a simple search in Google, find us, of course. And within our industry, we are fairly well known now, which is great. As I said, we're pulled together of 13 companies in touch with health, Shrewd, My Pathway, Beautiful Information, Synopsis, Diamond, EMR. I could go on. We really want to take the pain away from the industry. We really want to go into a customer and say, what's your challenge? And we go and solve that challenge, both from providing the solutions or bringing in the partners to help provide those solutions so they can focus on patient care. We believe we are the biggest and best upcoming solution provider of this type. We have hundreds of years of healthcare experience between us. We have clinical staff within the industry that have been in the industry forever, that work within our company, and we're passionate and we care. Please come and see us, come speak to us, reach out to me, and I'll put you in touch with anybody, or if any healthcare professional would just like a chat, I'm here.
Amazing.
All right.
Thank you so much, Mike. It has been an absolute pleasure. It's been a fabulous chat. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, guys, and have a great day. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Tech Panel. If you like what you heard, make sure to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn to stay connected. A big thank you to our major sponsor, SmoothLink Integrations, for powering today's episode. And join us again on the next episode of the Tech Panel, where tech minds meet.